Hey guys, this is Martin. We are in the SQL injection section, and today's lab is blind SQL injection with conditional responses. So in this specific lab, the vulnerability, the SQL injection vulnerability is basically in something called a tracking cookie, right? So it's not always in a parameter like in the previous examples. It can also be like in a cookie value. And so basically this cookie is used for analytics purposes, and it performs a SQL query containing the value of the submitted cookie. Okay, so it is a blind injection because there is no results being returned and no error messages are displayed. So whenever you have this condition, we're talking about a blind SQL injection. Now, these days, most of the SQL injections are blind because the framework has gotten better over the years and less verbose. And whenever you find a SQL injection these days, it's usually blind, right? And this is one of the scenarios, for example, where you would use SQL map, right? And we are going through the solution together for you to get an understanding like how it actually works. But in reality, you use SQL map, and I will show you this as well. So first and foremost, like if you go to a solution, so the tracking ID cookie is vulnerable, right? Like it has a value set, and if you do like a query like this, tracking ID equals XYZ and then end1 equals 1, it basically verifies that a welcome back message appears in the response. So you got a welcome back. If you change it to a false condition, if you say 1 equals 2, the welcome message will not appear. And that's basically your condition you can now use to exploit this. And then what you can do is basically in the next step is like you will craft a SQL query like this, like select A from users, limit 1, so just one position, and basically verify that the condition is true, confirming that there is a table called users. Basically, so this is to verify there's a table called users, and then you can make it more complex. Basically, you will then say like where username is administrator, so you can basically verify that the username administrator exists, right? So all based on this condition, like whether the welcome back message appears or welcome back message does not appear. And then you can start, so now you know that there is an administrator password. You can then basically start doing like, is there a password? Is there a password in length of larger than 1, which should be the case. If this condition is true, then it confirms that there is a password greater than 1. Then you repeat the same query with number 2. Then you repeat the query with number 3, and so on, and so on, and so on. And you can actually do this in burp repeater, like you could automate this. Sorry, not repeater. You would use intruder because repeater is slower. And so in intruder, you would then simply mark this particular position, I believe it's shown here, whereby you basically then just reiterate through this. I think they show it somewhere. Yeah, like here, all right? Like then you can basically reiterate through this. Whenever you see the both of the paragraph signs, that's like the payload position in burp and things like that. But to be honest with you, you don't do this like in the real world. You wouldn't do it like this. But the purpose of this, of going through this, and please read through this again, is then basically reiterating the password. Like is the first character of the password an A, and if the condition is true, then move on to the next one, right? And then, or if it's not A, then try B, then try C, then try D. So you go through all these conditions, and you just have this one message. The welcome back message appears, or it doesn't, or it doesn't appear. And then you run through the whole exercise, and you can read all this. But this is typically not how you do it when you exploit this in a bug bounty program or in a penetration test. So what you're going to do is you use something called SQL map. And I'm going to show you how to automate this very, very easily. So this is the SQL map command, basically. So SQL map -u for the URL. So that's the URL along with the parameter which we are going to try, right? Like, so the category pets, which is not vulnerable in this scenario because the vulnerability is in the tracking ID in this one here, right? But you have to supply the cookie values, and you have 2 cookie values. One is a session value and one is a tracking ID value. So if I show you this real quick in burp, it's over here. like you can see, there's a tracking ID and there is a session ID, and you need to integrate them in your SQL map command. And then you use --level 2, and so, which is like an intensity level in burp, and then you specify that kind of database you're targeting. So in this case, it's PostgreSQL. SQL. Now, if you don't know this, right, what you would do is you would simply let it run like this, like without these additional commands, just level 2, and then it will return you which database it is. It just takes longer, but if you already know the database and you can append the database, you say dump the database and you use 5 recurring or concurrent threads, basically, right? Like to run this. And then you just punch this into SQL map, and then what you will see is like here it started off, up here. So this is the command I've just shown you, and then it basically at some point it finds that the tracking ID is vulnerable, right? And here it says cookie parameter tracking ID appears to be and Boolean based, what we just discussed, blind injectable, basically, with the welcome back message. So the SQL map successfully has seen this error, and then it's basically doing its work, and it's starting to retrieve all the information. And then at the end of the day, you get like a table with your administrator and the password and all the other users as well. And then you simply head over here to Burp and log in. And this should basically solve the lab, right? And it's always good to use SQL map, like for SQL injection. It's important to understand how this is done. And this is why I recommend, again, to read through the solution and really understand every single step, how you could do this manually, and maybe even run through it once manually. But in practice, you're not going to do it like this because it's very time consuming, and you're normally bound by time limits when you do a penetration test. So this is why you have SQL map. But please take a moment and read through this. But this is basically blind SQL injection with conditional responses. Hope this makes sense, and see you in the next video.